I said certified freak 7 days a week. Wet ass P-word. Make that pullout game weak. Even the fully free will position does not ignore the impact of environment and genetics. It says that in limited circumstances, you have the ability to choose otherwise.
What?
Then there are people who are what I don't like is the generalized argument that America is institutionally racist or systemically racist when your only evidence of quote-unquote institutional or systemic racism is that there is disproportionate impact of a law on a particular population.
That's obviously not true.
But on a governmental level, if you guys don't just get out of this business entirely, the left has no endpoint. Their only endpoint is using the government as a club against you.
Okay, definitely not false.
In terms of watchability and sort of addictiveness, pretty good show. I would give it maybe a 7 out of 10. In terms of politics, I give it like a 1 out of 10 because again, the politics.
How can anyone listen to this for an entire podcast?
All right, as you can see, I just went shopping at Home Depot. You should do the same. This wood, this board, this magnificent piece of poplar is now mine.
How can anyone find Ben Shapiro appealing?
Your data is a precious thing. It's you, all those little details that make up your life, your address, your image, your gender, your interests, your relatives, and so much more. This information is more valuable than you think though, and as you're probably aware, all those sites you visit on a daily basis are eager to take your data, often without you knowing that they have, and they profit from it. Believe it or not, you actually have the right to request that data brokers delete the information that they have on you. The problem, however, is that it takes a lot of time and effort to do so, and it would more than likely take you years to accomplish. Incogni is here to help though. They can contact data brokers for you and request that they remove all your personal data, including handling any objections that these brokers may have. It's an incredibly simple process. All you do is set up an account, grant Incogni the right to request the removal of data on your behalf, and the rest is handled entirely by them, so you don't have to lift a finger. This is especially useful when you consider that the amount of data breaches that companies across the world are experiencing are becoming disturbingly more common. The 2021 annual data breach report by the Identity Theft Resource Center found that there were 68% more data breaches than in the previous year, so it's more important than ever to have control over who handles your data. As a special offer to my viewers, Incogni are offering the first 100 people who use the promo code Salari or click on the link below 20% off. I've been using it myself since, as a content creator, privacy is a huge concern. Moments after signing up, they already found 118 companies that have my data, most of which I've never even heard of. All I have to do now is wait for Incogni to do its thing, so if you want the same, sign up now and take back control of your data.
Ben Shapiro is wildly popular and successful. He's written and published 16 books and became a syndicated columnist at the age of 17. He graduated cum laude from Harvard University, had his own legal consultancy firm at age 26, became editor-at-large for Breitbart in the same year, and eventually started up his own news site, The Daily Wire, which often receives more visits through Facebook links than any other news site in the world. He also has a podcast, The Ben Shapiro Show, which was the 12th most listened to in 2021, according to Podcast Consumers Tracking Report. And he also makes frequent appearances on television news, along with being a regular fixture at speaking events across America. He is undeniably accomplished, but it's also undeniable that he had a leg up from an early age, being the child of a Hollywood TV executive, a field which Ben once actually tried to get into as a comedy screenwriter but failed, likely because he's about as funny as a funeral for a puppy.
I've yet to know of too many conservatives, which is where you put yourself, who are funny.
The idea that conservatism is inherently unfunny is not true.
You talk about having conceived of the plot for a TV series.
I've written a couple comedies, kind of hour-long dramedies for, spec script.
And have they been bought?
No.
Being born into privilege doesn't necessarily guarantee success. Without a doubt it helps, but it's not a given. However, after a few years of being aware of Ben Shapiro's existence, hearing his insights, being told that he's wise and intelligent beyond his years, and seeing how astoundingly popular he is, it made me wonder, why is that the case? Ben is obviously academically accomplished, but as a speaker, he doesn't seem all that smart, at least to anyone who's willing to be critical and not just accept what he has to say wholesale. There have been numerous occasions in which people have pointed out the gaping holes and flaws in his arguments, to the point where you can only assume that Ben is aware of this but says them purely to appeal to his audience. On a more aesthetic level, Ben is, to put it bluntly, unpleasant to listen to and at times difficult to watch. When you're a public speaker, a good voice and well-considered natural body language goes a very long way. I don't say this to be mean, but in general, Ben is lacking in these respects, with a nasally, often monotonous way of speaking that personally I find very grating, and a stiffness in his body that could rival the socks hidden under the bed of a 14-year-old boy. In other words, he doesn't really seem to have much in the way of charisma, and when you pair that with his willingness to deliver asinine and obviously false statements, it makes it all the more confusing that the man who constantly loves to claim that facts don't care about your feelings has become the champion of conservatives. Most bafflingly to me, though, is how Ben Shapiro is so popular among young people, with the vast majority of his podcast listeners being under the age of 40. In 2017, Sabrina Tavernise wrote a profile of Ben in which she referred to him as the cool kids philosopher, proving that either the word cool has lost all value or that Sabrina has never met a cool person in her life, which I'm guessing is probably the case since she works for the New York Times. Ben Shapiro claims to be a libertarian, however that's something that is categorically false. Even though he believes in things like how the free market should handle the welfare system, he also believes that same-sex marriage should be illegal. Like many avowed libertarians in America, his idea of personal freedoms only applies to his own desires, and is happily willing to oppose the freedom of others if it aligns with his personal beliefs, essentially using the government as a personal bodyguard of sorts. Ben started gaining significant attention from the public after the election of Donald Trump and in the afterglow of the Gamergate movement. Both of these events helped embolden people who held onto regressive, often far-right viewpoints, which they found were becoming increasingly less acceptable in many real-life and online spaces. This was especially the case in college campuses across America, which for decades now, conservatives have considered to be a place where young minds are indoctrinated with leftist ideology, something which Ben actually wrote about in his 2004 book, Brainwashed: How Universities Indoctrinate America's Youth. Younger generations have undeniably been veering towards more progressive ideologies, becoming more accepting of each other's differences, rejecting tradition, and being more critical of the ruling classes around the world. They're being more mindful of injustice towards the vulnerable and shunning individualism in favor of the collective. This change has become a terrifying prospect for those in power, as it's a direct threat to their wealth and influence, and as such, various conservative institutions with a tremendous amount of financial capital have made the effort to try and win over young people to their side to ensure the status quo is kept intact. The battle over young generations has largely taken place over the internet, namely in the spaces where teens and young adults spend most of their time, social media. Various popular right-wing figures have appeared and grown in popularity over the years, presenting themselves as either a well-educated, well-informed authority on politics, much like Ben Shapiro, or just a more regular person who's developed a voice and understanding of the world around them by being involved with their online communities. As part of the effort to win over young minds, Ben Shapiro began visiting colleges across America to do speaking events, discussing a variety of social issues, including how universities censor freedom of speech, despite the fact that he's at a university, speaking freely, and getting paid to do so. In essence, this was his way of throwing a wrench into the supposed socialist-making machine that is the higher education system in the US. During these talks, he would open up the floor for students to ask questions, and understandably, there would be people in attendance who didn't agree with his rhetoric and wanted a chance to speak out against him. Unfortunately though, these students were unwittingly falling into Ben's trap. Like many other right-wing media figures, Ben has received years of media training. He's learned not only how to respond to questions, but how to position himself in such a way where he has the natural advantage, deciding who's best to receive questions from and the ideal location to do so. Being in an auditorium filled with people who mostly agree with him at his own event is a huge advantage. But Ben understands that if he wants to win the minds of young people, he needs to prove that he's better than their peers, and in turn have the person that agrees with him believe that they're more knowledgeable than their peers. During these speaking events, the kind of person who criticizes Ben isn't a well-trained public speaker or a debater. It's someone in early adulthood who cares a lot about other people and wants to speak out against the awful things this powerful and influential person is saying on a platform he was given to by the institution they're paying a lot of money to study at. This isn't to say that it's impossible to beat Ben at his own game. There have been plenty of occasions in which he was, if you'll excuse the term, destroyed by facts and logic.
You sound like a bozo, bro. And you get no pussy, and you can't even make your wife wet, bro, so what's good?
But for every victory against Ben that's been documented and published online, there's hundreds of others where the opposite is true, or at least portrayed as a victory, since even when he's known to say something that's profoundly incorrect, his supporters have been known to dress it up as a win. I'm sure that at some point you've been browsing YouTube and seemingly out of nowhere you've been recommended something from the destroys genre. You know what I'm talking about. The title is usually something like Ben Shapiro destroys X, and X usually being something like snowflakes, transgenderism, feminism, etc. These videos are where Ben and people like him really gain their popularity. There's a great deal of hostility towards marginalized groups on YouTube, and many users who consume content that's made with the intention of validating their biases, made evident by the absurdly high view counts of these videos. They are lacking in one important thing though, and that is nuance. They're all compilations with snippets of footage where someone like Ben supposedly owns their opponent but removed from its original context. With editing, it's remarkably easy to make it look like someone is the victor. All you have to do is take a snippet out of the runtime where the person you want to win looks like they have the higher ground and toss away the rest. Take for example, this now infamous clip of Ben Shapiro being interviewed by Andrew Neil on BBC News. Here's a very simple edit of this 16-minute video that I made which gives Ben the upper hand.
There's a thought movement inside the Republican Party. I mean, haven't the Conservatives run out of ideas in America?
There's a rich intellectual debate on the right about nationalism versus patriotism, for example, or populism versus free marketeerism. Number one, not all ideas are good ideas. I mean, AOC is pretty good evidence of that.
There we go, facts and logic wins the day again, right? But if we skip to another part of the video, you'll see that things worked out quite differently, and I think that even the best video editors would be hard-pressed to make Ben look good.
You know, I'm not inclined to continue an interview with a person as badly motivated as you as an interviewer, so I think we're done here. I appreciate your time, sir.
All right,
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time and for showing that anger is not part of American political discourse. Now, Mr. Shapiro, we'll say goodbye.
Now, if you're unaware, Ben very much did not come out on top of this interview. He treated it like a debate, whereas Andrew Neil didn't. He got flustered when being asked certain questions, made poor attempts at trying to turn the table on the interviewer, and even went as far as demanding that Andrew Neil admit that he's a leftist.
Why don't you just say that you're on the left? Is this so hard for you? Why can't you just be honest?
The same Andrew Neil who went on to become the founding chairman and presenter of GB News, which, for all intents and purposes, is the UK's version of Fox News. The thing is, Andrew Neil wasn't even trying to embarrass Ben, he was just asking questions. Ben embarrassed himself because unlike those lecture halls where he gets to stand behind a podium and bully an inexperienced 18-year-old, he was up against a seasoned journalist who was simply doing his job by asking questions. Neil didn't go into that interview with the intention of destroying Ben Shapiro. Ben just proved that he's incapable of standing up to scrutiny, and that's not even the first time that that's happened. There was also the time where he appeared on Dr. Drew to discuss Caitlyn Jenner around the time that she came out as trans, and being the vile little goblin that he is, Ben went out of his way to not only deadname and misgender Caitlyn, but misgender panelist and transgender reporter Zoe Tur to her face, which led to her, understandably, threatening physical violence towards Ben.
You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
Yeah, that seems mildly inappropriate for a political discussion.
You'd think that with all of Ben's failures being well documented and available online, that people would come to the realization that he's kind of a fraud, that he's not this towering intellect or a master of debate, but instead just a guy that likes to say things that makes others upset. But if that was the case, you'd expect that he wouldn't be as popular and appealing as he is. I'm sure there's a good amount of people who once looked up to him and changed their mind after seeing these embarrassments, but even when presented with the evidence, some people will deny the truth. In fact, you need only look at the comments of the Dr. Drew video to see that despite him embarrassing himself and talking about how science supports his argument without offering anything remotely concrete that backs it up, there are hundreds, if not thousands of commenters saying how he came out on top, that he was the only smart person in the room, and what Zoe Tur had to say was completely invalidated after resorting to physical threats. When it confirms their bias, people believe what they want to believe and see what they want to see. Ben Shapiro is a showman who's in a position of power, and so long as his followers aren't willing to question him or his credentials, he can hold on to that power and forever be seen as this wise, supposedly cool philosopher, a man who speaks the truth in a world that's going mad around him. Ben doesn't have to be right, he just has to say the right things, and that just happens to be whatever his audience wants him to say, which is their truth.
Welcome aboard the Boost Bus, the segment in each video where I take a moment to promote other content creators who I believe make some excellent content and could do with a bit more attention. As I mentioned previously, since in the last video I had some technical issues that kept me from doing this segment, this time I'm going to be showing you the work of 3 creators for the price of 1. First up is the documentary The Myth of Canadian Healthcare, directed by Kieran Fong. It offers a thorough look into how politicians and the various financial interests at play have been gradually trying to privatize various sectors of Canada's healthcare industry through underfunding and understaffing. As someone who hails from a country with universal healthcare that's been under similar threats for well over a decade now, I firmly believe that this is something very worthy of attention, especially after moving to a country with privatized healthcare and seeing how disastrous that can be. Kieran has done an incredible job with this project. It's professionally produced and well researched, but doesn't have anywhere near the views it deserves, so check it out. Next up is the YouTube channel The Leftist Cooks. Based out of Ireland, Neil, an NB queer activist, and Sarah, an academic researcher with a master's in epidemiology, create videos with the intention of making higher education level content publicly available and accessible to everyone, with the belief that the antidote to individualistic capitalism is community building, something which I entirely agree with. As you probably guessed, their videos are intensely well researched, but presented as humorous, easy to digest content that's engaging and enlightening. I want to especially recommend the video Do Your Research, How to Understand Scientific Studies, something which is increasingly important in this day and age and disturbingly overlooked. My wife is a scientist and she was so impressed by this that she insisted that I mention it specifically. Last but not least, there's Jake Video. Jake explores various aspects of the awful world of video games, offering their excellent and often hilarious insight. This includes reviewing various franchises, both new and old, and discussing their influence within the industry. I watch a lot of gaming related content and analysis on YouTube myself, just because if I watched content like mine all day, I'd probably be crying into my pillow all day, and I can say for certain that Jake is very good at what he does, and I look forward to seeing what he does next. In particular, I'd like to recommend his video on accessibility in video games, partly a look at how games should be playable by all, and partly a look at the anti-consumer practices by companies like Nintendo that refuse refuse to preserve their past works properly. You can find links to all three of these creators in the description below. Please do what you can to help them out by viewing their content, subscribing, leaving comments, and if you can, support them financially on Patreon. It all goes an incredibly long way in helping them grow. If you yourself are a small content creator who wants a ride on the Boost Bus, then feel free to send me one email at salarivideo@gmail.com. Please be sure to include a brief bio about yourself and your work, your pronouns, links to your socials, and anything else that's important. And also, if you're something like an artist, please be sure to include high-quality samples of your work to be used in the video. I won't be able to reply to your emails due to the volume I receive, but rest assured they are all being read. Anyway, I've just been told that the bus has a bomb in it, and if we go under 50 miles per hour, it'll explode.
So what is the appeal of Ben Shapiro? Is he funny? No, not intentionally, at least. Is he smart? Not particularly. He's accomplished, but he said some profoundly dumb things. Is he a good speaker? I guess if you enjoy listening to a human being who has the cadence of a text-to-speech bot, then maybe.
When I grow up, I want to be able to reach the highest shelf at the supermarket.
Is he insightful? God, no. Is he charismatic? Well, that'll replace the clown that tries to kill me in my dreams at night. Like I said earlier, I'm not trying to be mean here. Although, to be frank, I don't particularly care if it is, because Ben is a truly awful person. But I think it's fair to say that as public speakers go, Ben has little to no appeal. His voice is generally awful, he's incredibly stiff, he's not at all personable, and in general comes across as incredibly smug and caustic. Ben doesn't speak to people with the intention of appealing to them on their level. He speaks down to everyone to assert dominance and to give the impression of control to his audience. Compromise isn't in his vocabulary, and as such it's evident that he doesn't want to win over the people who disagree with him. He just wants to pander to those who already are on his side, and I believe therein lies his appeal. Ben Shapiro, in essence, is a surrogate for his followers. He's the man that gets to stand in front of important people on huge platforms, say the things that his fans wish that they could say out loud, and not only does he get away with it, he's celebrated for it. Unlike a regular person, Ben can say the worst things and sometimes the wrong things, but at the end of the day, he still gets to go home to his expensive house, watch his bank balance fatten, and read endless amounts of glowing praise from adoring fans who refuse to actually engage with Ben's rhetoric in a way that's actually critical. I will say though that I do actually feel a bit sorry for Ben's wife. Given his shyness towards anything to do with sexuality, I imagine that it can be pretty difficult convincing him that all those vibrating plastic objects that she keeps tucking away in her underwear drawer are just back massagers. It doesn't matter to them if he's right or if he's appealing. The only thing that matters to his fans is that he can continue doing what he does with impunity. It doesn't even matter to his peers. Take, for example, Dave Rubin, a gay man with a husband who once asked Ben publicly whether he'd attend his wedding if he was invited, to which Ben said that he wouldn't, nor would he bake them a cake, because he thinks that homosexuality should be defined as a mental illness listed in the DSM.
Will you bake Reuben a wedding cake? So the answer is no.
How did Dave respond to this? The way he always does. He just smiled and nodded while this vile gremlin told him that loving another man meant that he was ill. Not all too surprising, I guess, given how Dave loves to stroke the egos of his conservative guests. For young right-wing people, especially men, Ben is that part of them that's angry towards women and marginalized people for supposedly robbing them of power that should belong to them. He's the one who can deflect blame for them and assure them that they're the victim in a culture war. For older people, Ben is who a millennial should be, a person who wants to return to the mid-20th century where they believe that everyone was civil and life was uncomplicated, despite that very much not being true. He's a figurehead, not a great one, and I'm sure that even some of his fans would admit to that, but regardless of his appeal, he has power, influence, and an unwillingness to see any part of his crusade as wrong. He lets people believe that they're right, even when presented with evidence that they are not. Although Ben loves to claim that facts don't care about your feelings, it's clear that for him and his admirers that their feelings don't really care about the truth. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment. All of that stuff really does help out. Also, I'd like to give a big thank you to all of my patrons that you can see scrolling down the screen over here. They all chip in a little bit each month to help keep the channel going, and it is incredibly appreciated. I'd also like to give a special thank you to all of the patrons that donate $5 or more each month, and that goes out to Gregory Wells, Natalie Doria, Fati1703, Elizren, Xingping LL, Joseph Bear, Jonathan Morris, Sean, Rose Jane, Caro Schultz, in a Borat voice, my wife, Nicholas Abumat, Bear, Masons, Bailey Grevling, Gerzon Bear, Hello Father, Henry the Longshot, Christian Moyer, Catherine Pendell, Nicholas McDonnell, Azul Crescent, Rachel J. Stark, Maurice Robert, Candide, Dan McCrary, Remy Allen, Daniel Perrone, Anna Marie Hanyasova, Grant B., Jordan Christoph, Rach, Enrique Gutierrez, Merger Fashionable, Alina, R. Atoms, Games, Sander Panda, CB Harts, Kevin Korber, Lillian Rohn, Sharfay, Mickey Buonadonna, Sparrow Wagon, Ruby O'Connor, Donna Sato, Marcel Gibson, Sem, not Sam, Thomas Tomacano, Jen Veldine, Tadeo Deoria, Ryan Osterman, King Me, Alicia Crawford, Jay, Matthew Torres, Marius Stubbard, Your Sweet Pea, Catherine, Lizzie Peasy, and finally, Freeman Killer. Thank you all so very much for your support. It really does mean the world to me. And if you would also like to support the channel, you can do so at patreon.com/Salari. Any amount goes a very way in helping out the channel grow, and it is all greatly appreciated, even if it's just $1. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the video. I know this is a bit of a short one compared to the other ones I've been doing recently. I wanted to see if I could make something short again, just for the sake of my own health and sanity, even if that did mean talking about Ben Shapiro, of all people, subjects which I told myself I'd never do, but here I am. But thank you once again. Take care of yourselves, unless you're Ben Shapiro, in which case I hate your guts. You're one of the worst people in the world, and I wish the worst for you. But if you're not Ben Shapiro, then I wish you the best. You're appreciated, you're valued, you are loved. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I will see you next time, all right? Bye-bye.